When your dog does something once, doesn't matter how you did it, whatever method. If the dog did it once, that's great. That's a great achievement. That's a great milestone. Don't do it over and over and over again because the dog's going to think it's just not getting it right and failing, and you're going to burn that dog out. Highlight those moments and make those moments count, and then just create a pattern of behavior that creates habits, right? And when those dogs start having those things habitually and they do it with confidence, then move on. The training sessions, they're so short. The reason they're short is because the way the dog thinks, if you're making that dog repeat something over and over and over again, a lot of the time that dog's just going to be trying to figure out, like, did I do this right? Did I do this wrong? How am I doing this? Am I supposed to be doing something different? When a dog does something right and you notify that and you reward them, the dog gets that sinks in. The small moments add up to something way bigger than trying to rep that dog over and over and over again. Look for your win, take your win, and then walk away with that win and own it, and then come on back when you can get ready for another win. Set them up for success each time.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of GDIY. Joined with me is my buddy Ben Fretz of North Country Sporting Dogs. Ben, I'm glad we're finally making this happen. I know we've talked about doing something for a while, but I'm glad that we're finally circling around to doing this. You mentioned that you've had something on your mind here recently when dealing with the average gun dog owner and clients, and so I'm excited to kind of pick your brain and we can kind of preach to everybody how patience is indeed a virtue.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Happy to have a chat. Yeah. I'm looking
Well,
forward to it.
man, go ahead, start off, introduce yourself, tell everybody where you're from, the business you operate and how you just kind of fell into this world.
Yeah. So I'm Ben Fretz, North Country Sporting Dogs. Coming from you from my wife's home office. We're here in Alberta. Um, I got into dogs just from coming home from the hospital. We always had dogs. I mean, we always had. I had sheep dogs, beagles, and walkers, and every mutt you can imagine. And labs were kind of the hunting dog for us. So we always had them. And then it just kind of turned into something that I wanted to do more in terms of, a lifestyle that I could try and eke out a living with,
Yeah.
and it kind of grew into something that's been, well, it's turned into something bigger faster than I expected, and I'm thankful for it. So the full-time job has been training, and I didn't really have the full-blown intention of getting into that right when I started, but it was something that's just always kind of happened, helping buddies out, training dogs and having fun. Um, and I think because when you have experience with dogs and you have a knack for it and you kind of, you pursue something, you put the hours and the time in, things start to happen for you. So it's been great, really been experiencing a lot of growth and a lot of, I got a great clientele base and great group of people to work with. Brought on a guy named Jody Funk. You might know him. He's running Vizslas and he's been working here with me this year and having a great time doing that. So it's nice when kind of diversify some of those kibble slinging, turd scooping, glamour jobs in the midst of building a new kennel, which is a lot of fun and a bit stressful and a little tiring, but it's great. Looking forward to getting that done. But yeah, so the thing I guess we were talking about with patience, it's the every client every client deals with this, and then every friend deals with this. I deal with it. It's just when you're dealing with patients and bird dogs, it always seems like whether it's somebody buying a pup or somebody who's coming in to get their dog ready for a season, they've got their goal and they're shooting for it, right? And that is like they love their dog and they bought their dog for a reason, but that goal just seems to kind of cast a bit of a shadow over common sense sometimes and blurs the lines between, what's best for the dog, what's the dog even capable of achieving, and then maybe what's going to be fun. I mean, sometimes it just seems to rob the joy out of the whole experience when you're just so focused on an end goal. You kind of miss the forest for the trees. So yeah,
Yeah.
patience when it comes to dog training, it's a big thing. I mean, it kind of touches every little aspect of it.
Yeah. And it's a tough subject to address, especially without coming across as too preachy on your soapbox.
Yeah.
But because it's like we
Yeah.
tell everybody, everything in life, no matter what you do, any kind of skill set or discipline or just hobby that you want to get into, it is important to have goals. But if you let everything that within that activity revolve around that goal, it's easy to allow that to overshadow the day to day, or to your point, you start losing the joy of it, so to speak. And then I don't think anybody really sets out with a goal in mind to really be detrimental to the dog.
Mhm.
But a lot of times people do become obsessed with their goal, be it a certain timeline or certain skill set, whatever, you can fill in the blank with whatever type of goal. And by pushing for it, at the expense of your dog, you are starting to stress out your dog. You are starting to steal some of the dog's drive, and if it's not enjoyable for us, it's not enjoyable for the dog.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's
absolutely.
amazing how many people, not even just new people, but people that have been in this space for a while, they just continuously do it over and over
Yeah,
and over
yeah,
again. I mean, I've been guilty of putting a goal out in front of one of my dogs before, to her detriment, and I've spoken about that on the podcast before in my Muncie. But I would argue that also came from a lack of experience, right? And now I'm a lot more patient, and I've gotten back to where I enjoy the development of the dogs. And it's hard to stress that to certain people, especially when you live in a world to where, let's face it, a lot of breeders, they won't even, they don't even consider you for buying one of their pups unless you agree to do a certain amount of testing in certain
yeah.
times. And you can't blame the breeder for asking for that, but at the same time, like, I think we could do a better job of trying to explain or develop new people in the space to understand that, like, yes, we want you to go do this puppy level testing, pick your poison on which organization,
Sure,
but
yeah.
don't let it come at the expense of the dog overall in the bigger picture.
Yeah, and I think people like I breed as well, and I think a lot of the time it's the people who probably put more of the pressure on themselves because they don't want to let the breeder down. They spend all this time talking with them, and a lot of the time people develop a relationship with the breeder that they're buying a pup from because they've done so much so much homework and calls and emails and chatting on the phone and visits and all the rest, and they don't want to let somebody down. And that kind of pressure, boy, I mean, I see it sometimes, and it's you feel bad for the like a client. I mean, I do get a lot of clients who will bang on the door in the 11th hour and they've got a puppy test coming up and they're just sweating it. And, it's like, okay, I mean, we'll work through these things, but, first and foremost, just have some fun. I
Yeah.
mean, just bring the fun back into it. And it's amazing how the dogs just seem to bounce right back. Um, and I get that as a breeder as well. I'm still early on compared to a lot of people out there in terms of their breeding program and what I want to accomplish. Um, and for me, first and foremost, I guess you just go back to who you are and your passion. It's hunting. I love hunting. I love being outdoors. I like hunting, and that's why I like hunting dogs. It's a lot of fun. Doesn't matter kind of what dog we're working with. It's fun. Um, And so before I've got a dog that I'm considering for breeding, I want to see them for a couple seasons in the field anyways. I just want to see what they push through. I want to see what they do. And then the tests, totally valid. I mean, great things can come from them, especially when you're setting goals, right? I mean, if you don't have a goal and if you're new to it, um, these tests can open up community. They can open up, training regimens and things that kind of help put you on a path to achieving something. Um, but I think just to remember the perspective of it, I mean, different tests are just for registries, and then there's competitions, which are competition, and that's something completely different. So, I mean, you kind of find out what your passion is and what you're going for. And then, like you said, it's a perspective of the whole thing. So, when you get into training and you've got puppy test people come in last minute sweating it again, remind them it's fun, right? It's not supposed to be the, end all to be all. And you can't really hold the breeders, I don't know, feet to the fire over that because they're just trying to do what's right for the dog and the breed, right? So
Hmm.
it's kind of it's a double-edged sword all the way through. I mean, there's all these things that are great for the people and great for the dogs, as long as you temper it and kind of balance it out with some patience.
Yeah.
So as long as you're taking your time, approaching it with some fun, and your goal is to have a relationship with that dog, those milestones just start to happen. You kind of just start to achieve these goals just from living with that dog and having fun building that relationship.
Yeah. I'm interested because I field a lot of messages and questions from listeners on social media or email. Somebody, I do get somebody reaching out like, "Hey, I have an NA test next week or something like that. How can I prepare for it?" Right?
Yeah, yeah,
And so I do feel that. But if somebody, to use your analogy, people knocking at your door at the 11th hour before the test, I'm curious, in your experience, have you noticed it happening more often in these entry level tests, the NA tests and NAVDA, the junior tests and AKC, fill in the blank. We're not picking on any
yep.
specific organization. Do you recognize or see this being more common in the entry level testing more so than even the quote unquote advanced level testing?
Yeah, I think because you've got more people who are just getting started into dogs and getting into that world, and they've kind of heard about this and they've made this commitment with their breeder. Once you kind of pass that initial launch pad and you're getting into the later stages of dog handling and then training and testing, and by that time people kind of have an idea of what they're getting into. They've been to a test, they've seen the people sweating it, or heard about them having the sleepless nights beforehand, or trying to cram in everything they can in the last month. So I think at that point, um, people start to plan a little bit more, and also at that point as well, they've already been through the entry level tests and all the rest. So that probably you probably shed some extra weight there, and people don't always come back. Um, so I was just running a few training days with a local NAVDA chapter, and we had a lot of dogs, big spread, right? I mean, big spread of dogs. You got pups there, and then you got dogs that are have run UT tests and are training for going beyond, and you're trying to figure out with this club and this group of people how to manage what you can get everybody involved in, and what they can do and what they can help each other out with. And the big part was trying to get those people who've been around the block a couple times to help out these people who are just getting started, and kind of show them that it's a good time, it's comfortable, get involved. It's not just like show up, get branded with the NA, and then leave. It's, have some fun, work your dog. This is just a byproduct of having a dog from somebody here. You can kind of get involved with a group of people, and there's a lot more groups out there available. Um, and when you kind of start to do some of that stuff and work on the handling as opposed to the tasks of the test, the mindset kind of shifts, and it's not for everybody. Some people have a hard time getting off those goals that they've got. I mean, I need to get this because my dog's going to do this on test day. But if you work on that relationship that you're building with that dog, and that just general handling skills, suddenly it becomes enjoyable. The dog starts to do things, starts to interact with you, starts to listen a little bit better, and then performs those tasks better. And then everybody gets to kind of just get into a mindset of, okay, we're just working with a dog in that moment. And then you realize when you're meeting that dog in that moment, that's all that dog can handle at that point. And everybody starts to recognize, whether it's a pup or it's an older dog that's experienced, this is where the dog needs a break.
Yeah.
So you kind of stop. And so those little pauses in it really started to help slow everybody down, um, to the point I think where they could reflect on their own goals. What does their dog actually need? What do they need to do? What do they need to change? Because essentially, you're training that dog to cooperate with you in terms of like, play this game that we want to play. Are we doing it right? Do I need to change things up? Do I need to hold them accountable? What do I need to do? So those pauses and those breaks, the patience of it. I mean, you advance so much faster
Yeah.
than opposed to the just bull rush, you know, through the doors and get it. So yeah, I mean, trying to shift away from like the entry level tests and the experienced dogs, and separating them, trying to work them all together, was interesting. It didn't have like I mean, it's a catch all. So everybody's got to work on something a little different. But I thought it was great because it kind of forced all of us to, one, build a little bit more community, help out each other, focus, and change the focus from what does my dog get right now to how do I build into this community, which then inevitably slows everything down.
Yeah.
So
That's
yeah,
a really interesting point to make because, at least in the bulk of group days, training days, chapter days, what have you, is usually it is broken out by experience level. And it's not so much that like, oh, you haven't earned the right to be in this field with us advanced, better, we know better than you kind of feel, but it's really more just efficiency, right? Like,
Yeah,
everybody in this
yeah,
field should be working kind of in the similar skill set or at the same level as opposed to that. But you raise an interesting point to where if you guys are never really in the same field at the same time, seeing the same dogs and learning from it, it's hard to get the more experienced guys to help the newer people. So that is an interesting perspective there. But also just at the bigger picture overall is if we are noticing this trend in the quote unquote entry level test, I have to say that I would think that maybe we as a community as a whole are going about bringing new people into this type of stuff in a short-sighted manner overall.
yeah.
And I've been vocal about this on this show over the years is when I go to, and I am going to pick on NAVDA a little bit on this, and I've done it a number of times, but if all you're doing when you're trying to help somebody is talking through the lens of the test, that
Yeah,
if somebody's first day, or not even first day, just first season with their first dog, their puppy, if all of the advice that you're giving starts with, well, on test day, well, the judges are going to be looking at this, well, on this, you have to do that. I would say that you're going about it the wrong way, to where you should be encouraging the new person in developing the actual skill base, exposing them to the dog the same as you would your own dog for to actually develop a hunting dog rather than a testing dog.
yeah,
And I think it's so hard that the NAVDA people specifically are so passionate about NAVDA. Like they love it, they eat it up, and they really just they want to share it. But I swear I see it more often than not. Somebody brand new
yeah,
coming into it, and it's just like, oh, I have this brand new dog. It's my first pointing dog ever. I have no idea what to do. Can you help me out here? And then next thing you know, the good intentions are there, but the people that are helping them is it's coming through the lens of how do you pass an NA test, and they never stop to actually talk about what pointing actually is, how the dog
yeah,
is
yeah,
expressing drive, and then conversely, like they'll say like you need to learn how to read your dog, but you're talking to somebody that doesn't know how to read,
yeah.
right?
Absolutely,
And so you have
absolutely.
you have them trying to look at this, by feeling braille rather than actually reading
Yeah,
their dog. They don't know what to look
yeah,
for. And so then you ask questions. If they do struggle, they go to a training day and they're struggling on their dog developing point, and you're like, well, tell me what you've done so far. It's always, well, so and so put out this many birds and they did this and they did that. It's not, well, what is the dog showing you? Why do we
yeah,
think that it's not developing point yet? Why do we think that all of a sudden it's bird shy or gun shy or what have you? Is instead of focusing on the skill set, it's almost unanimously through the criteria and the checklist of the actual test.
yeah, absolutely. And I find a lot of the time when I'm dealing, whether it's with clients or classes and stuff like that, or if I'm helping out with training day, um, I love that you pointed in, like just pointed at the lens because everybody does. They've got their own perspective, and you've always got to remember that when people are looking at something, they've got their own experiences, they've got their own goals, they've got something that they're trying to achieve, and to try and stop that and kind of just bring it back to right the ground zero. Here's the dog. Here's how a dog thinks. Here's how a dog moves. Here's how a dog communicates, and trying to have them understand. I'm gonna move my body this way. I'm gonna look for these cues on this dog. I'm gonna invite them in this way or that way. I'm gonna have points of contact. You're trying to teach the people obviously way more than you're teaching the dogs. And so on a NAVDA day, since we're talking NAVDA, um, I mean, I love most of these clubs. People show up with their dogs and they're ready to do it, and they all have their dog and their projects, and that's what they're focused on. And you can't really blame them. That's what they're there for. At the same time, the idea of, and like the chapter that I was helping out with did a great job of just saying maybe we need to change things up. Maybe we just need to pump the brakes for a moment. Um, it was the routine of people show up, they get three birds, they go out and they do those three birds, whether their dogs were ready for it or not. Whether their
Yeah.
dogs are learning good lessons, they're still learning something and they're putting it into practice every single time. So kind of bringing it all back to ground zero and the starting line here and saying, okay, I just want you to have your dog stop and settle down. You know what I mean? I want you to work with your
Yes.
dogs. Once they're in a mindset where they can learn, okay, then we'll start teaching them. And if the dogs can't handle it, that's when you're going to stop for a moment. You're going to give them a break because they need it, and then you're
Yeah.
going to learn how to read that dog. And now we're going to carry on. And training days that we're taking, an entire day and having a hard time getting wrapped up by 4:35, they were all these dogs were cooked by 11:30, and then we're lighting up a barbecue and people were done by 1. So it was a great time. It was really good and the dogs had a good time, but the focus was definitely we're shifting off of tasks and we're focusing on the relationship. And we're going to be patient. We're going to watch that dog and we're going to meet that dog where it's at. And you stop worrying about what you want and you start focusing on what can that dog do right now. Um, and then the dog started to achieve really great things. I mean, within 3 sessions, you had a whole swath of dogs that were steady to wing and shot. Why? Just because the dog is focused on that relationship with you. They're focused on that contact with you. And we're talking pups and stuff like that. We're talking dogs that normally would lose it and chase all over the place and never come back. I mean, we're talking all these things because we brought it back to the relationship.
Yes.
So if you have patience and you don't focus on these goals and you focus on that relationship, all those goals come into play. And yeah, I see it with NAVDA up here, CKC. I mean, like I said, AKC, but all these different, it doesn't matter what group you're getting into, people are passionate about it. And it's good because these people help carry these things on. I mean, I ran one of my dogs that's FCI registration. And so I ran it in the VJP. Um, the spring puppy test for the German testing system. And it was great experience, a lot of fun. Pup did really well. Um, and it was come to the fall or talking about the fall test after, and I'm looking at it and it's a conflict with my daughter's birthday. I've got kind of that break in the season where I've been training dogs all spring and summer, and then sheep season opens and I want to take a little break away and get at that, and I know I can't do everything all at once, and I'm going to have the dogs coming back in and running. So I'm kind of looking at it, and the guy's like, that dog only has that once. That's that one test. You owe it to that dog to get there. And at first, yeah, I mean, he's like, man, you sold me. You're right. That dog only has it once. And I was like, yeah, whatever. My daughter has his birthday. You know what I mean?
Yeah, my
If I was
daughter also
only in
has
this
his birthday
system
once too. So
once, so little reminder there. But it was like, yeah, I mean, it's easy to get caught up in this stuff and passionate about it. And if I was running my dogs in only that system, okay, I get that. But I mean, the luxury of being able to pick and choose different systems to run with allows you to be flexible and kind of bounce around a little bit, get some things, qualify your dogs. But for what purpose? You know what I
yeah,
mean? You got to always bounce it back. Why am I doing this stuff? I mean, for me personally, I do it because I want to have accountability in my breeding program. For years, I never talked to another person in this dog world because I didn't want to. I was hunting. I mean, that was the exact opposite of what I wanted to do. I did not want to see people. I wanted to go out hunting. I wanted to be with my dogs. So the idea of coming into this world, just learning the vernacular of all these, what do all these, what's the alphabet soup even mean? I didn't care. I didn't want to care. I didn't want to know about it. And I didn't care about it. And then I realized, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to make a lifestyle switch. I better focus on these things and, become accountable. So I dove into it. And I mean, true to my ignorance, I mean, it opened up a wonderful world of lots of great people. And I've grown, as a dog handler for sure. And just in terms of knowledge and all the rest. But those years leading up to it, what was my priority? My priority was hunting and good
yeah,
hunting dogs and having a good time. I didn't really care about anything other than let's watch this dog develop.
right.
So kind of that as my foundation, I think helps me kind of come back to it. I mean, you've got a lot of people who come through and get a first dog, and what do they want to do? They want to do everything right. You know what I mean? It's like their first kid and you're trying to do everything right. So I don't know. first time parents always make a bunch of mistakes on their first guinea pig. So it's like the same with the pups, right?
Yeah. And I hope anybody listening to this doesn't take us as picking on any of the circuits. It
No,
is what it
absolutely
is.
not.
It's real observations. Like it's a common thing to where, it does come from a standpoint of passion, and you want to share what you're passionate about with everybody else. I would just say, you picked on you highlighted something that's very important, is why are you doing this? It's one thing if you're a breeder or you're getting somebody involved in the NAVDA thing to encourage, or even if you're a breeder, require somebody buying your dog to do the test. But to me, I would suggest that along with that suggestion or request comes a certain level of responsibility to better explain to them the actual purpose of the
Yeah.
test. And I say that
Yeah.
because just as many of the people that I see that are stressed out or anxious over the test, test jitters are different than the people that, like, it's a looming dark thing on the
Dread.
calendar, dreading that test.
Sleepless nights and
Right.
tears.
Like,
Yeah.
to me,
Yeah.
like, just test jitters, that's different than somebody dreading to do this. But
Yeah.
for each
Absolutely.
person that I see that, I also see just as many people coming in to maybe they don't have any quote unquote healthy level of concern or nervousness going into the test. And you hear them on test day, well, if my dog gets a prize 3 on the NA test, then I'm good to breed. And it's like,
Yeah.
this isn't a
Yeah.
breeding qualification test.
No.
So just a
No.
standpoint of us explaining to them the entire purpose of the NA test, that's being lost in kind of two different directions here. And I
Yeah.
and I would
No.
say, again, going back to what you referenced earlier, focusing on the, explain to them why you want them to do the NA test or why they should. But then going back to the training day when they first show up with that first dog, go and focus on the handler skills, getting the dog in the frame of mind to learn, but also showing them just basic dog handling skills, opposition reflex, come go with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stuff like that will transfer a lot more than by you putting a bird in the field and forcing a point and either looking at them and be like, oh, it's either too young or, I've seen a lot of people here lately that have had poor experiences at training days because you have somebody trying to do it for them, and
Yeah.
it results in a dog becoming bird shy or launcher shy
Yeah.
or gun shy.
Yeah.
It was with the road is paved with the best intentions, but
Yeah. And it always is.
it
Yeah.
always is. But,
Always is.
if you are putting a bird down for a dog that you have seen all of 5 seconds with that
Yeah.
handler, and you're
Yeah.
putting a bird down, and whether the dog points it or not, you're pulling back on the check cord to prevent it from catching the bird. You're not teaching the person, and you're definitely not setting a good exposure experience for that young dog. And me and my buddy Randall, we talk about this all the time, to where I was very, usually I don't really care too much about what people call certain events, and we get into like the nomenclature of everything. It kind of gets wishy-washy, but I was a fan of NAVDA changing the name of their handlers clinics to the aims and rules clinics, because
Yeah.
it mainly focuses on the test and the rules and how
Yeah.
judges
It doesn't.
perceive things.
Yeah.
It doesn't it that didn't
Not the
actually
handler.
teach the handler how to
No.
handle. And there are so many people when they come and they ask questions on how to train their dog, how to develop that relationship with their dog, what their dog's body language is even doing, their eyes glaze over when you start talking the bigger picture, and they have no idea up from down, left from right, because you're not talking to them about how to pass a test. And I
Yeah.
think I think it's long overdue for somebody that first comes to a chapter day, have a rule at those chapters, like, if this is your dog's first chapter day, they don't get any birds, you
Well,
know.
that's kind of how we went through things. So what we did, the idea, I had everybody over here where I train, and it was first, and this is maybe just a nuance for myself, but I can't stand when dogs are just barking nonstop.
Right.
It's probably because I got a pile of dogs around here all the time, but I like quiet dogs, and it just, behave yourself and just stop it. It drive me nuts. So um going to days where it was like all these dogs are out on this chain and they're just losing it. It was driving me crazy. And I just, the first stop was everybody just get your dog quiet. When your dog's quiet, put your dog on a lead and walk with that dog. When your dog's quiet on the lead, I want you to go take it through. Normally I have, clients jump hay bales or rocks down by the creek or whatever it is, but we do have some obstacle stuff as well. And so go do some obstacles. When you're done, I want you to go stand by that chain gang there. If your dog has not learned this, let's teach them this skill because they're going to be tied out at tests. They're going to be tied out at events. They're going to be tied out at places. We need them to learn these skills. You can't just throw it at them and figure, they'll bark their heads off till they self-regulate and get it. Maybe as a pup that'll happen. But I mean, if you never taught your kid to soothe themselves, and then you just abandon them at the 8, 9, 10, whatever years old, they're going to lose it as well. So the dog's the same way. I mean, the dog's just going to not understand what it needs to do in that environment. So trying to explain to everybody the first day, there was no talk of birds. It didn't matter what age the dog was, what skill set the dog was. We're just talking about handling and recognizing when your dog is learning and when your dog is not learning, and then how to make sure that that dog is focused on you so you can teach them something. And it was mostly just handling skills. Um, we lost a few people after the first day,
I
and then
can
we lost a few
imagine.
people after the second day. But by the third day, we really saw some big changes in people. Um, it's funny because we sit there and the biggest thing that we're trying to teach these dogs is, and what I'm explaining to folks is, there's boundaries, and when those dogs have boundaries, then they're secure and they understand where they can operate within, and then that comes, what creates confidence in that dog because they know where they can operate and they can do it freely because they know these are the boundaries. um, and so it's not about confining the dog, but it's about creating patterns of behavior that become habits. And so as we train these dogs and they do something habitually, then they know what they can fall back onto and they feel comfortable. And so then when you take them to new environments and new challenges, they explore them and operate confidently in these areas. So a lot of the time you get flack, or I get flack when I'm working with people and they really want to get their dog on birds. Aren't we bird dog training? It's like, well, if a dog gets dropped off here for board and training, they do not see a bird for at least a week because
Right.
all they're doing is they're just going to learn how to cooperate. They're going to learn what the rules of engagement are. How do you respect me? How do you respect other dogs? Are you able to just sit there and wait while I'm working another dog? There's all these different things that build into getting that dog into a pattern of behavior and a mindset that allows them to be patient and wait. And so they need to learn patience. Handlers need to make sure they practice patience. I have to take a break every once in a while and reload the patience, have a cup of coffee. I mean, I get it. Dogs are fun, and sometimes you can get so focused on the goal, that's where the frustration comes from, especially when there's timelines. And as a trainer, there's always a timeline and there's always unrealistic expectations that are attached to that timeline. And you're trying to do your best to do what's right for that dog and still give a good quality product that that person wants in terms of a service. Um, but it can never come at the expense of the dog's learning curve. It can never come at the expense of the dog's foundation. And if the dog doesn't have that proper foundation, which requires patience, nothing else gets built on it. Now, all the time where we run into the field and we've got these issues, the dog just isn't steady, the dog won't sit there. Even if the dog doesn't point, it all stems back to a lack of respect, a lack of handling, and a lack of understanding of how that dog is supposed to behave. So, taking the time, not even worrying about birds for that first day on that NAVDA training day was great. Second time through, okay, we're going to get all our dogs now. We're going to get them up on these place boards and we're kind of just break things down and expose these dogs. And we got basically just some pigeons, and I had a pigeon tethered up, but we're throwing some pigeons when all the dogs were calm. All the dogs were standing, all the dogs were still. And it was more about okay, guys, watch your dogs. Don't watch the bird. Don't worry about anything else. Just handle your dog. When your dog gets calm, then you give me a little notice. We're going to look. All the dogs are calm. Okay, bird goes, and everybody, all the dogs get a little amped up again. Okay, we're going to calm them all
Yeah.
back down, And then so we just kind of built off of that. I don't know. It's all foundation stuff. And it's all patience. And as soon as those people start getting a little amped up, we all got to take a break.
Yeah.
So
And I
yeah,
mean,
birds sometimes.
so so much of that, like there's so many little sections in that we preach all of the time, to where like, all right, even every dog is different. which implies
Yeah.
every handler is different, right? So
Yeah.
you can't just do a cookie cutter setup
No.
and run dogs through it all the time and it's going to be beneficial for all dogs. It might be beneficial for some dogs. It might not be. There are sometimes to where certain dogs that they need to be ramped up a little bit. Their drive needs to be built, so maybe those dogs do need a bunch of birds poured on them. Then you have the dogs that's bouncing off the walls neurotic over there, and the people
Yep.
are still throwing birds at them thinking
Yeah.
that we have to satisfy that drive.
Reel it in.
Right? And it's just like,
Yeah.
no, the worst thing you can do for that dog right now is present it with a bird. And then you
Yeah.
talk about, the foundations. The foundations are the foundations, regardless of which program or method you follow. The
Yeah.
principles are the principles. It is much more important for the handler to understand that so then they can react to their unique individual dog to
Yeah.
progress forward. And one of the biggest benefits, I would say, by training the dog yourself is you aren't beholden to somebody else's
Yeah.
timeline, right?
Yep.
If you take your dog to a pro trainer, the pro trainers are the only ones that technically have an actual timeline because they have schedules, they have uh, uh the calendar appointments. This dog's got to be out in 2 months, or they have certain tasks and
Absolutely.
criteria that they have to meet. So like, why self-impose a deadline or schedule at the detriment of your dog when one of the biggest benefits of training the dog yourself is you're not beholden to any deadline?
Yeah, and have fun with it, for crying out loud. You start putting deadlines on, you start
Right.
sucking all the joy out of it, and it's not fun anymore. I totally get you. I mean, when guys show up, um, doesn't matter if somebody drops their dog off for training with me, it's typically because they've tried and they just kind of hit a spot where they just can't get past it, and whatever it is in life, they've just figured that I'm at this point, I need some help. So normally it's take the dog, unpack some things, retrain some things, and then start down the path again. And when people come back, we always make sure that they're here for a minimum of 2 hours because now we're going to go through and I'm not going to talk to the dog. I'm not going to handle the dog for you. You're going to handle the dog, but we're going to walk through all these steps because it's important for me to make sure that this person feels confident with connecting with their dog. So, first, before they ever go out into the field and do anything with birds, we're just working handling skills. I mean, make sure your dog heals. I mean, no, I don't want them jumping over to heel, all bouncing around. Just I want them calmly come over to heel, and then I want you to calmly pet them. I don't want you to get them all riled up right now. Let's just bring it all down. And kind of little things that we see with the handler and what they're doing, and we just take time to train the handler. I want to make sure you do all these little steps just so that you understand what you're looking for because it's just about the communication.
Yeah.
The dog's going to go hunt. The dog knows how to hunt, but the dog also needs to understand that you're going to hold that dog accountable now, and then those are the boundaries. And suddenly the dog's happy to do it for you. So I get you. When people train their dogs, um, it's so satisfying. I mean, it's a journey, it's a relationship, and you've got all these things that come from it, benefits that are far expand past the world of just shooting a bird. Um, and then when you have people who kind of feel at a loss and then go to a trainer, making sure that trainer is going to sit there and work with them and take the time to explain everything with them and to them and make sure they work through those issues so that that person's confidently leaving with that. I mean, you can't get a dog back and expect it to behave the same way if you're not going to be kind of understanding how the dog works. So it's a huge part of it. And it brings so much joy to that client then to be able to walk away with confidence because they've just spent 2 hours running a dog in a field and never listened to them once. And now that dog is doing everything for them. And I'm just hanging out in the background. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm just kind of whispering in their ear, man, remember, this is what we're doing. Remember, here's how we're going to
Yeah.
communicate essentially. Right. So, yeah, I mean, to drop a dog off at a trainer and get it back, I mean, people do it and then they kind of just know if I don't have time for that, well, then I don't have time to train your dog because you're not going to have a good time with your dog and your dog's going to be frustrated and your dog's going to be right back here anyways. But if somebody's like, yeah, absolutely 2 hours a day, yeah, I mean, then they're in and I know they're committed and I know they want to do something with that dog. and they are the ones who walk away super happy every time and have a good relationship with that animal after. So it's all about the relationship,
Yeah.
all about that.
You have to be able to actually drive the sports car, or else you're just going to
Yeah.
wreck it on the side of the road.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and you know, you said something that I found really interesting, and it's 100% accurate. Is if you go take your bird dog, this goes back to the point you were making earlier, like, well, we're doing bird dogs. Birds make a bird dog, right?
Yeah.
If you go take your dog to a reputable quality trainer, they're not going to go throw your dog on birds within that first day, especially if not week. Like the
Yeah.
bulk of the guys that I respect and have gotten to know over the years, they're going to take that time to develop their own little miniature bond with that dog, because if you don't
Yeah.
have a working relationship with that dog, you can't go do work, and you
No.
have to have the foundations. And I think it's important to note, anybody that was just listening, when we're talking about the calm mindset, coming into heel, not bouncing around, stuff like that, that doesn't mean to cap or punish the dog to hell and back to get it to
No.
stop doing
No.
that, right? There's a
That's a good point.
way to
Yeah.
do this that doesn't steal your dog's enthusiasm and drive. And
Yeah.
when you're talking about a young dog, a puppy, it's the easiest thing to do. What you're describing earlier about, you know, you get all the dogs in a line, and when everybody's calm, you throw a bird. Well, you're using positive reinforcement with the bird being the reinforcer, and
Yeah.
it's very similar to my buddy Ethan at Standing Stone, his positive pigeon drill. The dog is bouncing around, it's not getting what it's wanting, and finally, just whether it's out of frustration or it gets tired of bouncing around, whatever, all of a sudden it just stops, and then you throw the bird, that dog's like, "Oh, what did I do to get that bird thrown?"
Yeah.
That's what I
Yeah.
wanted. I wanted that dopamine kick, right? I
Yeah.
wanted to be rewarded by that bird flying in my face. What did I do that
Yeah.
did that? And then you just repeat that. You do that two,
Yeah.
three,
Yeah.
4 times, and that dog just naturally stopping on its own. All of a sudden, boom, Ben threw a bird at me, right? He's going to start learning when my feet are still and when I am still, a bird appears out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Tell me how that doesn't transfer into the field. But the problem is, it goes back to patience. People don't
Yeah.
have the patience. And I would argue that the average person really doesn't even have the knowledge, because, again, when they go to a training group, what are they going to do? Well, we have 3 birds planted out there in the field. Let's go see if your dog points. And if it's a short hair, they're
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
And if it's anything besides a short hair, then people are looking at them saying, well, you should have gotten a short hair.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, I mean, you can't blame people. I mean, a lot of people show up and they're doing their best, and they're like, "Oh, I'm going to help out now. I did that NA test and I'm going to be there. I'm going to help out." And good. I mean, you need that, because on the flip side, you can have this drive-through mentality that just plagues I don't know, so many things in this world right now, where people just look at it for themselves and what do they get out of it. So, I mean, the community aspect of any of these shoot clubs, I mean, registrations, anything, take advantage of the community, take advantage of people's knowledge. I mean, get in there and then invest. Make sure that whatever you're taking out, you're putting back in and then some. And then you're going to make sure that it creates an environment where not only people are able to handle the workload that it takes of all these new people coming in and training them, but they make sure that they get a break and they get trained and dogs get trained, and the focus just is going to shift. So again, these 3 days, there's the focus was to be about handling your dog, as opposed to, we're going to go kill some birds. And it's just, I mean, I get it. It's not as flashy or as exciting,
Yeah.
but it really does make a big difference. I mean, it's
No,
funny you're talking about the
nobody
dopamine
gets a
kick.
pointing dog not to see them point.
No, I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, some people maybe want to, but not these people. Yeah,
Yeah.
not the people we're used to, I think. It's funny. So I got a couple hounds. I'm by no means a houndsman, but I got a couple hounds so I can dabble in it.
Yeah.
And the actually a couple people who run one of the local chapters, nav the chapters. They've got, I mean, Cross Iron Griffs, Ron and Mary, great people, really nice. Their whole life is dogs. I mean, you walk into this beautiful home that they have, You open the front door and it's just dog city. I mean, they got like a training table in their front foyer. I mean, it's this beautiful house that's just dogs, like it's a kennel now, and it's great. And um, so they were doing some stuff with like some filming, some TV thing, and I guess the TV show needed some hounds, and so they're like, "Oh yeah, we can talk to Ben." So this lady got a hold of me, and we got these hounds in there, and the dogs are supposed to, chase a bear or something like that because some bear killed some guy or whatever it is. It's an
Get
old
them.
fashioned Western kind of thing, exactly. So I'm like, yeah, I mean, the dogs can do that. Um, but it's funny because they're like, "So what have you trained the dogs?" I was like, "Really? Like, you open up the box door and let them loose.
It's a
That's what we
hound.
trained them." I mean,
Not that
but
you
they want
can't
them on
train them,
set to
but
do
for a
these
hunting
things and
hound, that's
cues and
yeah, that's all you
yeah. And
need.
so it was like, okay, so we've got like, 3 hours here to train these dogs to do whatever we can. And for the first time in my life, man, did I just resort to, food, kibble, kibble, kibble. I mean, it didn't matter what it was, like high reward treats, anything I could to just make sure that we notify, we reward, and we get these dogs dialed in for what they need to do right then and there. Um, and it kind of made me think again, like there's so many ways you can train a dog that you can get really quick results. And then how do you follow through with that, right? I mean, there's so many times with the NAVDA thing and with these chapters that we're talking about and patience. A lot of the time, you'll see it. Somebody will go and their dog will do something once, and the person's like, "Oh, success."
Yeah,
You know what I mean? My
yeah.
dog did it. They know it. They learned it. I'm on to the next thing, and that's the kind of patience that I guess I was referring to the most with you about. Um, I'm training these dogs, these hounds, and there's animal trainers there, and it's like this big thing. We want the animals to do whatever it was, and they're like, okay, we got it. We got them to look at us at the right time when that bear's here or half a body's there, and it's like I get it. Like they achieved that goal, and when we're looking at something like training bird dogs, and people are training their own bird dogs, it's a huge reminder that I got to give people all the time, and I got to give myself this when your dog does something once, doesn't matter how you did it, whether it's whatever method, however you did it. If the dog did it once, that's great. That's a great achievement. That's a great milestone. Do that again, and do that again when the dog's capable. Don't do it over and over and over again because the dog's going to think it's just not getting it right and failing, and you're going to burn that dog out. Take some time and highlight those moments and make those moments count, and then just create a pattern of behavior that creates habits, right? When those dogs start having those things habitually and they do it with confidence, then move on. I mean, I've got people who come back quite a bit and they're like, my dog's just chomping the birds too much, you know what I mean? And so they always start off the same way. Can we shoot some birds today? Why do we want to shoot some birds today? Well, my dog just keeps chewing these birds when they come back for the retrieve. I was like, well, then shooting a bunch of birds is not going to help us
Yeah.
out. I mean, let's let's
Let,
address the problem.
yeah,
Yes,
let's unpack this. Let's cut it down. All
let's.
right.
And you can tell the person's just raring to get to the finish line.
Yeah.
Um, and it's all with best intentions. They love the dog, they love the sport, they love the training, but they just can't see the problem for what it is. It's
Yeah.
their impatience. You know
Well,
what I mean?
it's like they struggle to see, using the example you just used of how their dog chomping the bird may not even be presented just by them picking up the bird in the field, but it could be at any stage in that sequence leading all the way up to them picking the bird up in the
Yeah.
field, because it's
Yeah.
amazing how often some of these bird crunchers, they don't exhibit that behavior on the table or in the short grass at heel.
No.
It takes unpacking and cutting down their entire process from the truck going to the edge of the field to the release before you can
Absolutely.
start seeing the dogs body language and behavior
Yeah.
change, right? And if you don't
That's
take the bigger
so good.
picture,
Yeah.
sometimes you miss those little small things, and then what do you end up doing? You have somebody that is convinced that that dog only chomps when it's a fresh killed bird in the
Yeah.
field, right? So they
Yeah.
keep setting it up and playing it over and over and over again, driving themselves mad because the dog
Yeah.
just continues to get worse. Then they start trying to punish at the wrong time, the wrong
Yeah.
behavior, and it's only making it worse because maybe that's an outlet. The dog is leaking frustration and anxiety by
Yeah.
crunching that bird, and by you trying to correct or punish at the wrong time, it's only
Yeah.
exasperating the problem. To whereas
Yeah.
if you just unpack it and it's like, oh, your lead up to the field you created that level of anxiety in that dog before you even said go. And I'm not saying that
Absolutely.
this is completely different for every situation and every dog and every handler, but that is what we're talking about, focusing on your handling skills and recognize
Yeah,
that the problem presented to you right now could be a result from 5 minutes ago rather than right now.
absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's one of the big things is like, and you did a great job unpacking that. I mean, I find when I'm talking with classes, the reason we start with something so fundamental with, I just want the dog being calm at your truck or your vehicle before you come on out. When that happens, your dog can advance. And the reason we're doing some of these things is that when the dog gets calm and relaxed and the dog will focus on you, we know that the dog's willing to work with you. And then we want, like we're talking about the dog not bouncing, skipping around to heel. And it's, you see a lot of the time these people are just building up and they're getting their dog amped up, and you know that they're pumped. They want their dog to just hit that hard and run on out. And I mean, a dog that's focused and a dog that knows a job and the dog that knows the boundaries, it can be calm one second and just flip it on the next. I mean, they know how to do that and they know how to turn it on. So taking the time to build that relationship with that dog gives the dog confidence. And so when you have that confidence, you don't run into some of these problems that just, where do they come from? How are they manifesting themselves? And then how do you unpack it? You take your time, you go slow. And every time you kind of hit a bit of a hole, go 3 steps back, because it's not just that. It's, you go 3 steps back and you work your way forward. Um, the chomping, not the at the bird thing. What, even when you tell somebody, okay, here's what I'd like you to do. I mean, here's we've found, okay, your dog's chomping on this bird. Let's kind of walk through a few different things here and find out what's kind of causing this. Okay, so there is maybe you skipped a little bit of homework here on your retrieving. Let's work through these issues. And you give those steps for somebody to practice, and then the sheepish grin comes back a few days later. Well, I kind of just, I skipped the last few of them because we were getting somewhere fast. And you think, well, you just kind of undermined everything that you were working for. And it's funny because you got to remind yourself all the time, whenever you get success with a dog, um, it's a great moment. That's really good. Now give that dog an opportunity to really let that sink in and stop. I mean, when I get my dogs out and I'm training dogs, the training sessions, we've talked about this, a lot of people talk about this, they're so short. You know what I mean? And the reason they're short is because you just don't want, I mean, a dog psychology, the way the dog thinks, if you're making that dog repeat something over and over and over again, a lot of the time that dog's just going to be trying to figure out, like, did I do this right? Did I do this wrong? How am I doing this? Am I supposed to be doing something different? Um, when a dog does something right and you notify that and you reward them in ever any capacity that you feel is best for you and your dog, the dog gets that sinks in. Maybe do that one more time and then let that be. Put that up. And the small moments add up to something way bigger than trying to rep that dog over and over and over again. Because not only are you allowing the dog time to think on all this stuff and let that all sink in, you then have a dog that's going to be exposing itself to a whole lot of opportunities to have bad lessons going on in one of these things as well. So, I mean, maybe that's kind of the training guy in me talking about managing a bunch of dogs, but that's my advice for people when they're training their dogs. Look for your win, take your win, and then walk away with that
Yeah.
win and own it, and then come on back when you can get ready for another win. Set them up for success each time. There's no
Start
reason to try
every
to get them.
session looking for the exit ramp.
Yeah, yeah,
It's different,
100%. Yeah,
and there is a time that developing a behavior and teaching a dog is different than proofing a dog, right? There
yeah,
is a
yeah,
time that you do have to hit reps to
yeah.
properly condition and classically condition that
Sure.
behavior. When
Yep.
you're teaching it, that's not the time. Short
No.
sessions, get paid,
No.
get out of there. And then there's a
Absolutely.
time to where we can start really refining that later on down
Yeah.
the road.
And that's
And
part of having those people have an understanding of the whole process, right? So when they
yes,
get something, they're teaching their dog something, they're like, oh, they got it, we're going to do it and move on. Yeah,
yeah.
I hear you. That's what we're talking
Yeah.
about.
And I want to unpack, let's go back to the chomping of the bird because this is good information because some people truly don't even know how to go about the troubleshooting process of
Yeah.
figuring out where the undesired behavior comes from, right? And if you don't
Yep.
understand how to really break out each individual task into individual sections to see where the train went off the tracks, it's a very important exercise. So let's use the bird chomping example. When you're troubleshooting, it does you no good to completely change all 20 steps of the scenario all at once, because if even if you do get the correct behavior out of the dog, you have no idea which one
Yeah.
actually
Yeah, no, you didn't
caused the
isolate
change,
anything.
right? You didn't
Yeah.
isolate
Yeah.
the actual like mechanism that caused that dog to do good or bad. And so when you're troubleshooting, just okay, your dog chomps birds when you shoot a bird in the field. Okay, maybe we do need to go put a bird out there and let's see, but let's start playing with the criteria. Let's start
Yeah.
playing with the context where if you really think that it's because you introduced gunfire, well, I would say there's an easy way to test this. Instead of planting a bird and going through the whole rigmarole of hunting, pointing, steadiness, retrieving, and by the
Yeah.
way, you care about retrieving, but you're still hitting the dog on the collar for steadiness, you know, do away
Yeah.
with all of
Yeah.
that. If you're
Yep.
trying to actually isolate this whole bird chomping behavior and you think it's brought with the gunfire, well, let's set it up to where you just go in the field, pop a bird, shoot it, and see if you still get the result. And if you do, then maybe you're a little closer, right? And you can just start layering in the criteria. You can start layering in the different subsections that created the entire scenario for him biting the bird either way. So like,
Yeah.
all right, the presentation matters. Maybe it's just, you're requiring such high level of steadiness. Maybe go out there and just pop the bird and shoot it and see what the dog does of you not requiring steadiness, right? Like unpacking and isolating where that actual undesired behavior presents itself, that is when you start troubleshooting and you can start honing in on the issue here. And it could go as far back as how you even approach the field, but don't go changing 500 things to
No.
try and correct one thing. And those are the skills that the good dog trainers, the good pros, they have that capability because they also don't have the vested interest. They don't have all of the backlog of just junk. Like say you're
Yeah.
the owner and you've tried everything, you're at your wits end,
Yeah.
you finally
Yeah.
come to Ben and are like, I've tried everything. I don't know what to do with this. You don't have that emotional frustration. You're going to be like, all right, let's just look at this as a any other problem solving skill set, and
Yeah.
you're just going to start playing with each little piece of context within that entire sequence, and you're going to figure out where it came unraveled.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's for me, it's easy because I mean, you get a lot of dogs coming in, so you see these things and you jump in and you kind of, address an issue. But still, like I said, when dogs come in, the first week is there's a lot to settle in with. There's a lot of new dogs. There's barking. There's all the rest going on, sniffing. I mean, there's just it's a big shock for a dog coming out of their home into okay, you're into bird dog boot camp here. And so we try and make that transition easy, and you start working on the relationship only. And I find that a lot of the people who have issues and they're trying to figure out what that issue is, a lot of the time it's not so much to do with the dog, it's just how they're handling that dog. You know what I mean? A lot of the time it has nothing to do with what the dog has been taught or learned or whatever. It's just the state of mind that that dog is in. And why is that dog in that state of mind? It's because you're rushing that dog through that sequence or you're putting too much pressure on the wrong area. And so when you're troubleshooting the dog, really you're troubleshooting yourself, because I can have people come in and say my dog will not point birds, and I'll say, go run the field. Let's see what goes on. And that dog goes in like a gator and just eats anything it can. And then I'm like, okay, leave the dog here. And I take the dog out and the dog slams on point. And it's like, well, what was the dog doing differently? Do you know what I mean? The dog just did not respect these people. Why did not the dog not respect these people? It started off right from the get-go. That dog could run all over. They'd hold the leashes. It's yanking them all around. It just had no boundaries. So whenever there's an issue with the dog, um, at first it's like Michael Jackson, I'll look in the mirror there. It's
Yeah.
like you go back and look at yourself, because somewhere you're making that dog do something stupid. You know what I mean? And if that's the easiest way to fix that dog, is just fix what you're doing. So I get what you're saying. It's true. You got to go through kind of with a bit of a comb. Um, and I love letting a dog go out and just learn to hunt by hunting. I mean, it's a lot of fun, and I do that with my own dogs. Um, but it's not a fail-safe way of taking a dog through little steps and building some sort of platform to work something on. And I mean, I can do that because I've got the experience and I know what I'm looking for, and when we're running birds and all the rest. But if a dog can be calm, if a dog can stay on a place board, or a dog can stand on a wool board, or a dog can just go in and just behave while other dogs are around. If the dog engages with me, the dog looks at me. There's so many small, little insignificant moments that we kind of let dogs get away with. Um, it's just the accountability and the consistency. And when you have those two things going on, those dogs suddenly realize that they know where they're supposed to be. They know what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to work with you and listen to you. And then that just applies to wherever they go. So if there's an issue like bird chomping, right? I mean, a lot of the time, I think it just stems back to somebody just getting that dog so wound up that they want that dog to go fetch that thing, that dog's got so much pent up energy and aggression or whatever it is, or excitement, that they just start chomping that bird. A lot of the time, I tell people who are having dogs chomping birds, throw that bird for them and just walk away. I
Hmm.
mean, I honestly, I sometimes I don't care if a dog eats a bird. It's not going to be the end of the world. You can work through so many different issues. A lot of times, like you said, that's not really the big issue. There's so many root things there, and a lot of the time it stems from that lack of relationship that you have with your dog, and the dog feels uncomfortable, and there's anxiety at that moment, and so they let that out by crunch, crunch, crunch. A lot of the time, if you give that dog some space and you redirect what that dog's supposed to do, the anxiety goes down. They switch their mind. They're going to go back to heel with you, and suddenly they're thinking about the task that they're supposed to do. So,
Yeah, it's I'm reminded of an episode I did a while back ago, like understanding your dog's behavior with Stephanie Vichinsky, distinguishing the difference between fear and anxiety in a dog. And
yeah,
fear is a dog that's afraid of a very specific thing. It's like it's a
yeah,
clear that, oh, the dog does not like, fill in the blank. Anxiety is the fear of the unknown. And so you talk
yeah,
about consistency and providing consistent boundaries for that dog to operate within. That's when you have the confident, cool, collected dog, the quiet
yeah,
mind. And so, again, not to keep throwing what ifs on this hypothetical bird cruncher that we're talking about,
yeah,
but
yeah,
to reiterate that is, if you're inconsistent in your handling skills on, say, the handoff, right, when
yeah,
they come back at your heel or in front, if there's not clear consistent criteria, that dog might be chomping that bird because of you, because it has no idea how's dad going to react this time. Does he want me at heel? Does he want me to sit in front of him? Is he going to snatch it? Is he going to get upset with me because I was unsteady? There's a lot of unknowns in that dog, so he that could be a nervous uh
yeah,
sign from that dog anticipating uncertainty or anxiousness from bringing it back to you. And so,
yeah, absolutely, yeah,
and that's just one of many goals, and that's why, we go back to bring this full circle, is this does come back into you being an actual handler. It's one thing for us to own the dog. We're taking the dog home, we're responsible for feeding it, we have certain responsibilities. But
yeah,
as a handler, our responsibility is to actually handle that dog consistently and fairly. And it's amazing how, if you just focus on this, is why I tell everybody it's not a crime for you to talk to your dog. If you're just one of those verbal people that like talking to their dogs, there's nothing wrong with that.
no,
But when you're talking to the average person, by getting you to shut your mouth and you only speak when it's required, that brings you to a certain level of evenness and consistency that the dog
yeah,
can then anticipate and decipher, right? The
yeah,
advanced dog
yeah,
trainers, I know some guys that they just like talking to their dog, and it means
yeah,
nothing. It's just like, "Oh, what'd you do there? That was interesting," blah 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 blah.
yeah,
And they know that they're saying nothing to the dog. But that's why we tell everybody, like, just to be safe, shut your mouth,
Yeah.
And then it removes all confusion and gray area for that dog,
Yeah.
is it goes back to being the handler that your dog deserves, and it's fair. And then you're going to see that level of enthusiasm and that just fun energy from your dog. And man, I'm sorry, when your dog is having fun, I know we talk about, our energy travels down the leash to the dog.
It comes on back.
It comes right back. I mean, have you ever
Yeah.
been in a pissy mood? You might be having the world's worst training
Yeah.
session, and the dog just crushes a rep, and it looks at you and gives you a goofy
Like
ass
that.
smile,
Yeah.
and you're like,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
what? Life is good. Even though 5
Yeah.
seconds ago I
Yeah.
wanted to punch you across this field, right now I kind of like you. I might take you home and feed you.
Yeah.
The energy goes both ways. So if we can
It does.
establish
Yeah.
that dog
Yeah.
that has fun doing what it's wanting to do, nothing is more deflating to me than being in a field with a dog that you can just see and you can feel that dog is only doing it because you're
Yeah.
making him do it. I don't like being in the field with
No,
that energy.
no, I don't like that either. And I think that's part of the reason why I like harping on I guess my clients and people like that choose to put up with listening to me is that if you focus on the relationship and the foundations and you get the dog comfortable in these little steps and you build a habit and you build boundaries, it's all safe places for that dog and you're providing leadership. And then the dog does things happily for you and with you as opposed to just like afraid to step out of bounds or afraid to step into the wrong time or afraid to, Zeus is going to touch him with the lightning at the wrong time. It's just, the dog does something because it likes it. And I find you start to use and you have people as well using tools in a better way. I mean, like I got some people who are, they're new. And so they ask questions like, should I use an e-collar? Is it even good? I'm afraid of like nuking my dog and all this stuff. And it's like, well, you slap an e-collar on me and I'll put a leash on you and we're going to just pull on each other and we're going to see who gets hurt first. You know what I mean? Like I might get shocked, but you can kill somebody with a leash around their neck yanking it. So it's about what's the tool for, right?
Right.
And when those people slow down, they start to think about those things. Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, I use a leash for this, and I use a check cord for this, and I use this e-collar for this, and it's what works for them. They're understanding it's about communication, and suddenly these tools just become tools of communication as opposed to how I discipline the dog and whip it into shape into what I want to accomplish. It becomes how do I just communicate with my dog effectively using different tools. Um, yeah, and so when you see a dog that's just terrified in the field, not too sure, kind of unsure of what's supposed to happen, you see the person's all worked up. Yeah, it's kind of it's hard to see that, and I don't like it. And I kind of feel bad for that dog, and it kind of takes the fun out of the whole thing. And that's why I like to have people go back and just focus on a spot till your dog's real confident. When your dog's real confident, that's a great time to move on and feed that confidence into the next task.
Yeah.
Um, if it just nailed it once, great. Celebrate that win. Come back and get some reps on that, like we talked about before. But you got to build those habits. You got to build that behavior, and that builds a safe place for that dog. So keep building those platforms so it can go forward. And that way, when you are troubleshooting, you really don't need to go too far back because you've taken your time, you've slowly built a good foundation, and there's really no stones that you haven't unturned already. So you've got that calm, cool, collected dog, and you get to that point where maybe you're suffering a little bit of confusion, maybe that dog is, well, you know what you built before. There's no real uncertainty, and it's very easy to correct that dog and move forward. So
Yeah.
patience pays off in the end. It's a tortoise in the hare kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
it's worth it. It's
Yep.
worth it.
Patience is a virtue for a reason, man. It's
It is for sure.
and don't get me wrong, like I'm not casting or throwing stones at somebody else, and I've never
No, it's a
been
reminder.
impatient. Yeah, it's a reminder. And you and I are probably speaking from this. I think all trainers would speak from this that would really tout this information and echo what we're talking about here because of personal experience. We've all
Yeah,
been in that field to where we have all become impatient. We've all lost our
absolutely.
cool. It is not fun for you or the dog. And I've been in the field to where the dogs are having fun and I'm having fun. And that's what
Yeah,
I want day in, day out. I don't want to get back into the world of you're doing it because you have to. I'm trying to build the dogs that do it because they want to. There is that element of now, even if you don't want to in this instance, you're still going to do it.
sure. That's
but
part of a relationship.
it's part of a relationship. There's plenty of things that we do in
Yeah.
all of our day-to-day relationships. There are plenty of
Yeah.
things that we don't want to do, but you have to do.
Yeah.
But the most important word in that equation is it's fair then, right?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
you can go out there with an e-collar or check cord or pinch collar, you pick your tool of the trade, and you
Yeah.
can make a dog do whatever you want it to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But also, if you teach it in the right way and
They
you're
want to
speaking
do.
the correct language to the dog, they want to. And man, when you're in
Yeah.
the field with a dog that truly enjoys its job
Yeah.
and wants to make their handler happy, it's
Yeah.
you'll never go back to the dogs that, yeah, they'll do it if you're standing there watching them like a hawk with that e-collar in hand, ready to
Yeah.
correct them if you need to. But that's just our preference. Plenty of people have passed these tests and trials the other way
Yeah.
around. So,
Absolutely.
this is just kind of, this is our personal opinion on this. As we kind
Yeah.
of start kind of nearing the end of this, Ben, was there something else on this topic that you kind of had in your mind that you would want to touch on that maybe I didn't ask about or just didn't come up through conversation?
No, I think it's been a good chat. I mean, we jawed over a bunch of different things and kind of went in circles on the good stuff. And I think the big reminder I'd have for people is be patient and focus on clear communication. And then since we did talk so much about clubs and things like that and tests, the point I'd highlight is just have fun. I mean, focus on having fun with that dog. If you are somebody who just has a dog and you bought your dog and you want to train that dog and go through the experience of it, keep your eye on the end goal, which is you bought this dog to have in your life. You want to have that dog in your family. You want to have that dog for hunting. You want to have that dog for all the memories and everything that you're going to do with it. That's the goal. You know what I mean? All these things are just chapters, and it's all these little steps that are going to create a wonderful experience or something that you're going to regret. And so there's no sense feeding into regret. If you have a whole lot of concern about something, maybe just put it in perspective, understand what you got the dog for, and don't sweat the small stuff with that. You know what I mean? And sometimes,
Absolutely.
yes, a test might just be small stuff. So it's, again, not against any of these clubs. I belong to a lot of them, and I think they're great. There's so many great tools um, and benefits. But if you find yourself stressing out about some of this stuff, just remind yourself to be a little patient, work through the moment, and enjoy the long game, not the short game.
Absolutely. Well, before I let you go, I do have to ask. I know we spoke briefly at Pheasant Fest a few months ago while you were picking up your
Yeah.
fancy new box from
Yeah,
B
yeah,
Pro
yeah.
Kennels. How you liking
Fantastic.
that kennel? And
I love it. I
yeah,
love it. Not it's like the fanciest thing I own, first of all. It's sweet. And I got that brown color on the bottom so it matches that dust on my truck just right. It's good. It's so good. So no, I love it. I mean, dogs love it. It's great. I had to, so again, going back to that filming thing, which is a new experience for me, and I'm a fish out of water. I roll in there and they've got all the different people that you got to talk to, and American Humane Society and all the rest there that's checking everything over, making sure every animal's treated like gold. And she came over and she's looking at that dog box, and I'm explaining all the benefits and the features, and it's the roll cage and the strength and the space in between for allowing like temperature control and all the rest. And she's blown away, and that's the best dog box I've ever seen. Well, there you go. So I gotta tell Ben that. But yeah, it's awesome. I love that thing. I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
it.
Nobody's listening to this. We don't have to tell Ben. We don't want him to get too big a head, right? Uh, Now, so how? I mean, obviously you're up in Alberta, so you
Yep.
have a little bit different style of winter than we do, and
Yep.
this would have been February, early March, so you still had some cold on the ground up there. How
Yeah.
did it handle that level of cold and conditions up there for you?
Yeah, great. I mean, part of it's conditioning the dogs. And the other thing is, I mean, you close up those vents, you don't let it draft through when you're coming
Right.
through. And I like to stick a couple dogs in a box when it's that cold. Um, but yeah, it held up great. I mean, take the battery in at night and make sure you're putting that in the garage. But during the day, it still held juice nice and fine. And the dogs were happy. What I really loved about it is that, when you close up all those vents and you have a couple dogs in there, it doesn't take much to heat it up. And then even in the summer, I mean, summers aren't the same there, here as it is there, but it still gets warm enough and the swing is pretty big. And so you stick your hand in that box. It's nice, cool. So yeah, I like it.
Yeah, it's
Good
it's
box.
yeah, to the heat. That's why I was curious because you can speak to the cold and I can kind of speak to the
Yeah.
heat. I'm not familiar with anybody else in the southeast area of the US that has these boxes currently. And I've been interested to and it's been interesting to see the difference between this box setup and what I used to run, which was just, kennels in the back of the truck with the topper over the top. And
Yep.
it is staying cooler. Like I can
Nice.
check, I just checked the Govey system. I mean, it's in the low 80s temperature wise right now, but in the actual box, in the sun, in the wide open driveway, it's
Yeah.
low 90s. And when I
Yeah.
had the kennels in the topper in the truck, I would gain 15 to 20 degrees on average, and that was
Wow.
without good airflow. So now that the topper's off, the dog box is in the back of the truck, it's getting kind of any breeze or airflow, but it's also still only adding 10 degrees in direct sunlight.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's pretty good.
so far it seems to be doing the trick for me down here in the heat as well. And so that's
Nice.
why I wanted to kind of contrast with
Yeah.
you up in the north and
The
me
cold.
down there. Yeah.
Great White North here.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then,
That's
well,
good.
that's good to know. Glad you're enjoying the box. Last thing, and then I'll let you know or let you go. I know you have more important things to do. Talk about your recent hunt videos that you and my buddy Pavel put
Oh
on.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had Pavel on like years ago
Yeah.
on this podcast, so it was kind of interesting to see you two team up. I wasn't aware that that was coming. Then I watched y'all's blue grouse
Yeah.
hunt, so it was a pretty neat
Oh yeah.
little
Yeah.
quick
Yeah. It
video.
was fun. Yeah. I mean, they're just short little fun things that kind of just capture or hopefully capture a little bit of the essence of the different species that we've got around here. It was last year I was kind of chatting to him. I mean, I take photos, but I don't do a whole lot of video. So I was speaking with him. I thought maybe I'd take a crack at doing a little bit of filming and stuff like that. And said we've got so many different species, it'd be fun to just put a little highlight on where you go and what you do when you're chasing these, and maybe get some different dogs and different people out. And yeah, he was all game and grabbed the bull by the horns and he rode that one off, and I got to hang on for for the fun of it. It was great. It was a lot of fun. They're short little videos. We got a couple more coming out. So one came out today. Um, so yeah, we'll chase some sharps with some setters, and then we got a bit of a mix with his Wyme and a Vizsla, and
Yeah.
chasing some huns and pheasants, and it's fun. I mean, it's just there's so much great diversity in birds and geography in Alberta for the upland species. So I mean, you've got the unicorn of the ptarmigan, which people have a hard time chasing, and that's fun. You got the blues and the spruce and the ruff and the pheasants and sharps and huns, and I mean it's a great bunch of birds, and it's all pretty darn close. I mean, everything's within. I mean the grouse was just in the backyard, so
Yep.
yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it looked like you guys were having fun. I like the duration, quick little 5-6 minute video,
Yeah.
nicely shot, good story. Pavel, I had him on years ago just because I liked one of his videos and I reached out. So
Yeah. Nice.
he's a great guy, but wanted to highlight that. Anybody interested in that, I'll have the link to those
Oh,
episodes
fun
here in
stuff.
the show notes. I'll also have Ben's links to North Country Sporting Dogs. Ben, we'll have to actually circle back and do this again sometime soon. Maybe not take as long as we did this past time to finally sit down and do it, but
Yeah, for
the
sure.
the wait was worth it, I guess.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was good to chat. Come on
Yeah.
up and hunt sometime. It'll be fun.
Don't twist my arm too much.
Don't hesitate.